Following the Denver Broncos offseason program, we'll tell you why Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant, their stock is rising. Here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Broncos Country. Welcome into another episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. This is the place to be every single day, all year long. A special shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, become one. Hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on what's going on with the Denver Broncos. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, where you can check out my written coverage of the team, boots on the ground in Dove Valley, every single day over there at milehighsports.com.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert at predominantlyorange.com, where you can find my writing work every single day as well.
You know him, you love him. He's got an immense hat collection as well. We see you, hear you loud and clear, Broncos Country. But here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show as we go through our stock report following mandatory minicamp in the offseason program. We'll take a look at stock up and why some of the Broncos' young wide receivers like Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant, they're taking a step forward as the 2025 season comes up, and they'll be under the microscope a little bit as training camp comes forth. And on top of that, we'll also take a look at the stock down and looking at players at running back like Audric, Estime, and Blake Watson. With the addition of J.K. Dobbins, their stock has fallen. Can they find a way to make some plays to impress, to rise up during training camp in the preseason? We'll look at that. And then we're going to take a look at some players we'd like to see a little bit more of during training camp, including PJ Locke, who dealt with an injury and was obviously in recovery mode during the offseason program. And on top of that, how the defensive line is progressing with some of the guys there and the linebacker battle. You get all that and more here on today's episode of the show. Sayre, I love doing our stock reports here as we take a look at maybe whose stock is rising. First and foremost, I think we're going to highlight. We'll talk about Bo Nix here in a little bit. He's obviously a guy whose stock is up, but I feel like we should definitely talk about some of the younger guys that we've certainly, coming into the offseason, wanted to see a little bit more of and wanted to see maybe some defined roles happen from a second-year player, Troy Franklin being one of them, from a rookie, Pat Bryant being one of them. And I'll tell you, we saw a lot during the offseason program. I think that gives us some comfort in what they were able to accomplish here. They are on the stock rising. Let's talk about Troy Franklin first.
Yeah, for the time being, Cody, I think Sean Payton effectively called his shot, right? The interview that he did with Kay Adams way earlier in the offseason, where he's like, I don't know if the wide receiver position is as much of a need as some people are saying. Now we're getting to find out a little bit why. And Troy Franklin is front and center of that. The second-year player out of Oregon, size, speed, teammate of Bo Nix is at the college level. Everything seemed to be adding up for him to be this awesome, superstar rookie alongside Bo Nix. If certainly felt like if Bo was going to have success, that Troy was going to be part of it. It was a really disappointing rookie year for him. A lot of drops, bad timing with he and Bo Nix. Certainly other issues were there, but man, in year two, he seems more confident. It sounds like he's practicing well. Sean Payton even referenced that at the practices, the media is not even at, he's making a lot more explosive plays that you're all not seeing. And so Sean Payton is talking him up. He's saying that he's more confident out there, rocking his new jersey number 11. So Cody, I'm excited for Troy Franklin. The second year breakout hype seems to be very real here throughout the entire offseason program.
Yeah, and it's evident too. And one thing that Sean mentioned is that he's 5 pounds heavier. He's bulked up a little bit, added some muscle to his body, but he's still just as fast. But here's where I think that the stock for Troy has risen, right? The Broncos all last season as a rookie, they were really trying to find a role for him. And that was hard because you had guys like Devon Vele, who was a little bit more ahead of schedule, Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims. Even though early on in the season, Marvin's utilization wasn't anywhere close to what we saw down the stretch there. We saw a little more Greg Dulcich in the beginning part of the season. A little Jordan Humphrey had an extensive role. So really for Troy, the first few weeks of the regular season, he was inactive. Then Josh Reynolds has that injury. So for us, we saw Troy kind of thrust in. And the one thing they wanted to do was, okay, hey, can we get him on a scissors route or a post wheel where we can get him behind the defense if the corner goes with the post and doesn't, roll out to, obviously the wheel where Troy was at as the number 2 receiver. But everything that we saw primarily for Troy was, hey, let's just throw the ball downfield to this guy. He had the drop against the Raiders. there was that would have been a touchdown that would have made that a final score against the Raiders in that first matchup in week 5 a little more appealing on paper. And obviously, maybe it would have been Bo Nix's 30th touchdown of the year. And maybe the miss by Bo to Franklin against the Baltimore Ravens would have been 31, which would have tied him, I think, for Justin Herbert all time by a rookie quarterback. But, you're going to get what you can as it comes. And I think the development of Troy has been monumental. I think we've seen him utilized on some of the routes and some of the passing concepts that you and I think as long as he's been on the field, even his rookie season, we were saying, why don't we see Troy doing more of this? Like, why aren't the Broncos coaches putting him in this situation? It very much seems like they are understanding how to use Troy a little bit more. They want to go back to what worked well at the University of Oregon with he and Bo Nix. We are seeing that. That has me excited. But I'll tell you this, I think Broncos country should absolutely get excited about the rookie wide receiver, Pat Bryant, number 13. And Sayre, look, this was arguably when the draft pick happened, Broncos country was like, who is this guy? Why did we get him? This guy was available. There was a lot of skepticism. 4.6 40-yard dash. Well, Pat Bryant has, I think, turned in a tremendous offseason program dating back to rookie minicamp where you watch him move, Sayre, and people have seen me on my video reports. If you haven't, I've posted clips of what Pat Bryant does. This guy moves well. I'm sticking firm on my stance. I think he's going to be the best route running wide receiver the Broncos have. 4.6 speed, that doesn't matter. This is a guy who's been creating separation. He makes tough contested catches in traffic. That is a dynamic that this Broncos offense, really outside of Cortland Sutton, hasn't had. I think Pat Bryant is the type of guy that takes it as a personal mission, like, hey, I'm going to go get the football. Plus, I think he knows how to track the football at different trajectories, whether it be over the shoulder, over the top, outstretched. This is a guy that I think Broncos country is going to see at training camp or even in the preseason, and they're going to be like, I can't wait to see number 13 in the preseason and the regular season here.
He's got such innate ability at the catch point, doesn't he? I think that's what comes across really when you look at what he did at Illinois and what he did consistently over the last 3 years plus, right? Which is why I think Sean referenced the fact that, hey, we leaned heavily on Jim Leonhard in that evaluation process there. You're drafting people as much as you are drafting players. And Pat Bryant proves that the Broncos have a certain type of person that they want in their locker room, a certain way that guys go about their work habits. And Pat Bryant does those sorts of things. I think he could be one of the biggest steals of the draft. We caught wind from an article that, the Jaguars were trying to get him. And obviously everybody was trying to slow play that one. It's like when you're in a fantasy draft, right? And, there's a Broncos player out there that you really want so bad, and everybody else in your league, they're not Broncos fans, so they're not going to take the guy, but you're going to take RJ Harvey, or you're going to take whoever it ends up being way higher than everybody else because you love him and you believe so much that he can be awesome for your team. That's kind of what the Broncos did with Pat Bryant, right? Because they were not originally at the 74th overall selection. They were deeper down the line. Yeah. So they effectively moved up to get him in the whole wheeling and dealing that they did on day 2 of the draft. And yeah, he has explosiveness. He's got after the catch ability. He's got great hands, hand-eye coordination, body control. He's got a big frame. He's physical. He's one of those types of guys, Cody, that, man, how many names do we have to throw out there that ran a 4.59 or a 4.6 or a 4.61 or whatever? Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown. Those guys didn't run great 40-yard dash times. Pat Bryant, he can still find a way to carve out a very successful career for himself.
Somebody had told me, I was talking to someone in the Broncos building, and the one thing that they told me was, we think Pat Bryant can be what we wanted Jerry Jeudy to be. So that might be an exciting development to watch unfold. I'm not always a fan of saying, hey, let's go out there and let's say, hey, we want you to be what Jerry Jeudy should have been for this team. I think that's unrealistic early on. But if they think that's the potential and where he can get, all right, let's maybe see. But I'm not going to place that tag and that pressure on him as a rookie. That would be absolutely laughable. He's going to continue to grow and get reps. Bo Nix, obviously a guy whose stock is up from training mini camp here, going into training camp, leaner in terms of a muscle sense, but also bulkier and adding muscle mass. Just looks like he's got a lot of confidence to him as well. He's had a great offseason program. I think the pass rushers in which we've highlighted as well, Dondre Tillman, Q Robinson, Zach Allen. I mean, that defensive line group has been great. And I know we're going to focus on maybe that defensive line, the progression of some of these guys a little bit later on the show, but I definitely feel like stock up. There's a lot to invest in with that pass rush group at outside linebacker, including Cooper and Bonito. But Broncos Country, we're not done yet. We're going to go through and talk about our stock down from Broncos minicamp. And we'll tell you why Audric, Estime, and Blake Watson, they have a little bit of a mountain to climb in order to raise their stock in training camp. We'll highlight that and much more here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Broncos Country, today's episode of the show is brought to you by the Gametime app, and there is nothing like the NFL season. With the season fast approaching, you got preseason games coming up. You've got the regular season, obviously, where the Broncos, they're going to have 9 home games. They're going to have 8 away games, including 1 international game where if you want to travel, Gametime is the perfect place to get tickets because it's the kind of atmosphere, seeing a live game that you must experience. And this year's matchups, they're already going to deliver. And if you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games, regular season matchups, you name it. Prices on the app, they actually drop closer to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Gametime is a total game changer.
Well, Gametime makes scoring NFL tickets so easy. If you've never used the Gametime app to grab NFL seats, this season is going to be the time. It's seriously a game day upgrade. So take out the guesswork of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We gave you the good news before the bad news, Broncos Country, but you know what? Training camp is now on the horizon, and everybody's going to have a chance to maybe wipe the slate a little bit more clean here. Audric, Estime, Blake Watson, their stock, we got to consider it down right now after the addition of J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey in the draft. And R.J., Cody, sounds like had a really good mini camp for the Broncos, as did Jaleel McLaughlin. So guys that didn't perform as well or didn't stand out as much, maybe their stock could be perceived as down. There's others that you could maybe say, but ultimately, without too much contact out there at minicamp, it's tough to really say. I think you kind of got to look at the offseason program as a whole, maybe guys who got hurt. Let's start with the running backs, though, obviously, for all the listeners out there today, and talk about why the stock is down. It should be obvious, but I think there's maybe more than meets the eye that, you know, oh, they signed J.K. Dobbins, so obviously Audric, Estime stock is down. What did you see from Audric out there that might lead you to believe that his stock is kind of down right now?
Well, look, without going into too much detail, because there's certain things I'm not allowed to report on as it pertains to like which guys were practicing with which units, I would say we saw more Tyler Bidet, R.J. Harvey, Jaleel McLaughlin with Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham more so than we saw Audric Estime. You know, it seemed like those guys got more first looks in comparison to Estime. There were times where obviously Estime will get reps with Bo Nix, but it seemed like he was kind of down on the totem pole a little bit. And look, even for a guy like all this to be considered, Blake Watson injured. We didn't see him during mandatory minicamp. He was on the team's side field. Expect him to be ready for training camp, but missed time on the field, missed time on task. And now they go in, they add J.K. Dobbins. It's all right. It's tough. And when J.K. Dobbins signed, like everybody's talking about, oh, Jaleel McLaughlin, he's gone. No, I would say it's the far opposite of that. One thing I asked Sean Payton following the final day of minicamp practice, I asked him, you know, hey, like the evaluation process is so important when it comes to pads. How do you and your coaches evaluate these guys without pads? And Sean Payton said alignment, assignment, execution. He said the 3 things that you really need to make a roster are you doing what you're coached to do, and what is it looking like? Are you like there's all these factors that go into it. I don't know if this is us just looking at, but if you ask me, if you ask any other reporter that has been there at practice, they will tell you it seems like Audric Estime has an uphill battle to climb here. And look, I think some people are perceiving it as like us dogging on Audric. No, absolutely not. Like, Sayre, how many times have, you know, I come on the show or you come on the show and we said, hey, we want to see more Audric Estime. Audric's got this power running style that we saw effective at Notre Dame. We've seen flashes of him as a rookie. We want to see that come to fruition. And then he's inactive for the playoff game, which there was some context of that being related to a loyalty to Javonte Williams, but other guys were getting looks. And there might be something on behind the scenes, and this is just speculation, but it's weird to me that Audric isn't getting these first looks in comparison to other guys like Tyler Bidet, Jaleel McLaughlin, R.J. Harvey. He's very much not a priority in that rotation but he is getting reps. And Sean does say he is getting touches, but Sean also told us as well. He says, I know you guys are counting. Don't count. You're going to be wrong. So coach speaks, smoke screen, but it's hard to ignore that the signs right now scream stock down for Audric, Estime, Blake Watson, that these guys, they're going to have a long hill to climb here, I think, to turn heads. And they're going to have a very important training camp performance, I think, in order to maybe change that narrative.
Yeah, you got to go out there at training camp when the pads come on, especially if you're Audric Estime, and you got to start showing some stuff in the preseason as well. When you're in game situations, you just have to take advantage of every opportunity you get. Can't be putting the ball on the ground, have to be cracking some face mask and pass protection, all those sorts of things. You got to prove your reliability now, especially with J.K. Dobbins coming in, Cody. And by the way, what an impressive dude. I watched the interview that he did with the Denver media out there with you guys. And man, he's just, he reminded me of Petey from Remember the Titans. He's got that same, I bet you he thinks football is fun. You know what? I bet you he would say
hopefully,
that.
Hopefully he's not Petey as like the running back Petey in terms of like production wise. Personality, great. Production of Petey, though. Hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, no, we're talking about Donald Faison. Okay, I know the actor's name because I'm a huge Scrubs fan. I'll shout out to all the Scrubs fans listening. I know Donald.
Greatest football movie ever made.
Greatest. Oh, absolutely the greatest football movie ever. No question about it. I showed my wife that for the first time, by the way, Cody. She had never seen it before. She's 34 years old. She had never seen Remember the Titans. So, you know what? All the listeners need to, come onto YouTube and comment like, I'm so, so thankful you showed your wife that movie. But look, I think when you talk about stock down, like it's definitely the running backs, but then also guys that maybe, we talk about the old Rod Smith quote all the time. You can't make the club if you're always in the tub. And that is so true, right? And you don't want to see guys get injured. We don't want to bag on injured guys, but you have to talk about it. A.T. Perry wasn't out there all of minicamp, pretty much all of OTAs, right? I think even a tryout guy was wearing his jersey number out there. Will Shepherd. So you get a guy like that, okay, we're talking about let's try to find a way to force A.T. Perry onto this roster. Will they keep 7 guys? Could he beat out a Trent Sherfield? Could he beat out somebody else? You can't make the club if you're not on the field, right? So you got to be out there. I hate it for him because I'm sure he wants to be out there worse than anybody that's rooting for him wants to be out there. But I think you have to look at a guy like that as stock down, when you didn't do anything on the practice field all throughout the offseason program.
I think the good news, though, is Sean Payton said, A.T. Perry could be, a little bit later on, like he may not be ready for the start, but maybe a week after training camp starts, he may be ready to go, which I think, like we were just speculating, but that to me tells me it's injury related, right? And I think that's, you got to be able to get that grace. Now, if he comes into training camp fully healthy and balls out, okay, great. But that wide receiver group, gosh, they got so many dudes in there. Courtney Jackson, Jerwan Newton, Joaquin Davis. They got 3 undrafted guys there. And obviously Will Shepherd didn't make the, obviously he was a tryout player for minicamp, didn't necessarily get an invite, but he's going to be on the radar. Like if the Broncos make some roster moves and something frees up, Will Shepherd, I think, will likely be brought back. I think he's that type of player. But, man, that's a deep room right now. You got a bunch of guys competing. We've already talked about that wide receiver room for the most part being set in stone. So who is it really going to be? Like if you're going to have an extra spot, okay, Trent Sherfield plays special teams. Okay, A.T. Perry, in my opinion, I think is going to have to play special teams if he's going to make the 53-man roster. I think he's very, very talented. And that's the thing. Like I enjoyed watching him in practice last year. Big, explosive. He has the height and the athletic archetypes that Sean Payton is looking for. But hey, you're just buried on the depth chart right now. When you come back, you're going to have an uphill climb as well, like Blake Watson and Audric Estime. I would agree with you. I would say that these 3 guys probably are on the stock down. 2 of them because of injuries, not necessarily their fault, but also the emergence of other players at those positions. For me, I'm trying to think of another guy whose stock went down during practices here. I really can't think of anybody else. I think defensively, everybody looked really good for the most part. I think there are a couple players on the defense that are going to fall into our next category here about players we want to see more from and more of at training camp, but that's a good sign here early on. There's not a lot of negatives that come out of mandatory minicamp or OTAs unless there's an injury, right? Or unless there's a blatantly bad performance, whereas you're watching practice unfold. These guys, the reps that they're having, they're clean. There's some mistakes here and there, but it's nothing that's like, oh my gosh, like this guy, unbelievable, continues to make mistakes. Nothing of that stature just yet. But when training camp rolls around, the pads come on, we're going to find out. That's where the real football evaluation really begins. But Broncos Country, we've shared our stock up, we've shared our stock down. And one thing we are going to dive deep into is as training camp comes up in the month of July, who are some players that we want to see a little bit more from here as training camp rolls around? Sayre and I are going to tell you why PJ Locke is one of those guys we want to see a little bit more of, plus some of the younger defensive linemen as well. Here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. When training camp rolls around next month, we want to see a handful of players, obviously, that didn't get as much time on task during OTAs and minicamp. We want to see what they do, especially as there's some deep competitions that are unfolding at several positions offensively and defensively. We'll break all that down. Sayre, I think more importantly, as we look at players we'd like to see more of or hear more about during training camp, I've had my eyes on this entire roster. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of people to pay attention to. But is there anyone, in your opinion, you want to see or hear more of or more from when training camp rolls around in late July?
Well, I think we're all excited to find out how the linebacker battle continues to transpire, right? We're all excited to see those guys out there with pads flying around. Hopefully, Dre Greenlaw at full speed by that time. So I think everybody will be excited to see number 57 leading the charge out there with that defense. Obviously, Alex Singleton, Drew Sanders, the competition between those guys. And we heard Sean Payton kind of allude to the fact that maybe Justin Strnad has the advantage of now. Last year, he played a lot, and, Drew didn't. So, I mean, he wasn't necessarily making a direct comparison between, hey, this is a advantage Strnad and this is a disadvantage for Sanders, but he kind of did swing the pendulum a little bit Strnad's way in that comment that he made, in my opinion, just my perception of it. So I think that linebacker position battle going to be a really interesting one to monitor. I know we've talked about it a few times, but certainly that's going to be in focus as you get those guys all out on the field.
Well, and I think another thing too, when we talk about this linebacker group, I think we have to throw Alex Singleton in there, right? Because for him, he had the season-ending injury last year. He participated in team stretch and individual period during the off-season program mandatory minicamp, but he's going to get his first team action come the start of training camp. And so with these guys, Justin Strnad, Drew Sanders, those guys getting reps ahead of Alex, where is Alex at? Because I know as well as anyone, Alex is one of the toughest dudes mentally and physically. Obviously, to play a whole entire game after tearing your ACL, toughest dude in the world. I'll give that guy all the credit in the world because I've torn my ACL. It's torn now. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy in this entire world. And I think that's also an obstacle, though, when we talk about the mental aspect of it. I think he's got a good edge to him, but for us, it's an unknown. We got to wait and we got to see how it unfolds because he's also competing for a starting job. And so I think the fact that Drew and Justin, these guys were getting a lot of reps here during the offseason program. We know that they're in competition to start next to Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw is the only unquestioned starter right now. So Alex and those guys are going to come in and compete. I think you've had some younger guys at linebacker like Lavelle Bailey. I think had an impressively nice offseason program. I think he leaned up a little bit. He looks a little faster. He looks just a little more springy than what we saw last year. So I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out. And then you got some undrafted guys as well. I know Karene Reed, he didn't participate much in mandatory minicamp. He's dealing with an injury from what I have observed there. So, there's that. JB Brown. They had a couple of trial guys in that, once again, aren't going to be invited to the training camp roster initially. So I think really there's an advantage to be had here for a guy like Lavelle Bailey, but there's questions here with a guy like Alex Singleton. How does he respond coming in and just having a full workload here? Is he going to have a practice schedule where he practices 2 days, has that third day off, what we've seen Sean Payton and Bo Lowry kind of do? I'm curious to see where that's at, but I am also excited to maybe see a little bit more about the cornerback competition here with the guys that they have there. We've highlighted the top four guys there, right? With PS2, Riley Moss, Jahdae Barron, Jaquan McMillan. I think Broncos Country is going to be excited with how, if these guys stay healthy, how the Broncos will use these guys based on some of the things I've seen at practice. Unfortunately, I can't share, which makes it rough, Sayre. Like, I want to be able to share some of these things with the team, but we're not allowed to. If you want me to still be able to cover the team. So I just think Broncos fans are going to be excited about that. You want to see, obviously, Chris Abrams-Drain is going to get a lot of playing time here in the preseason. And then Damari Mathis, those guys are really kind of competing here. And Damari's got more, I think, of a chip on his shoulder. He's got a little bit more of an uphill battle compared to these other guys. So to me, I'm excited to hear or maybe see how Damari responds to some of this pressure here as he's in the final year of his contract.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that I think you could float into the stock down category almost, right? Just because he gave J.K. Dobbins the shirt off right off his back. I mean, he gave him his jersey number. It's like, that's a tough one right there, Cody. I mean, obviously you want to be nice to the guy. It's the number that he wants to wear to play in, but also Damari has been playing in that number. Maybe he feels like a number change or things like that can help just kind of renew his own self-confidence, because the Broncos, they have made a habit of drafting a lot of defensive backs under George Paton. Damari was obviously one of them, but he's buried on the depth chart. I mean, Chris Abrams-Drain, I think a lot more folks are talking about him than Damari at this point. So I'm sure he's in good spirits. Like, he's a professional and he knows that he's going to have a job no matter what. But with Denver, it's like, it's almost kind of hard to see, all right, where do I fit in this puzzle? Like, what are you guys going to ask me to do? Am I just going to be an injury replacement, or can I go out there at training camp and actually carve out a role? Like, could he take Jaquan McMillan's job on this? I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but be interested to see him out there as well, whatever number he's wearing, as well as PJ Locke too, Cody, the guy that we've been teasing. I think PJ's role in the defense is going to be fascinating, being that he was a starter last year. Him and Jaquan McMillan, starters last year, now relegated to likely backup or rotational roles. What do you think for PJ Locke? Like, what do you envision that for him?
Well, for me, the biggest thing that I know about PJ, from my understanding, if you look at his Instagram, he posted a video several months ago where he's kind of highlighting a docuseries, right? And it's evident he had some type of surgery. We don't know what it exactly was, but I'd say the good news was he was in team stretch. He didn't participate in individual or team for the first 2 days of mandatory minicamp. On the final day, he was out there with individual period, working with the safeties and the corners, doing the everyday drills that they always do in season. So that's a good sign. He's going to be ready to go for the start of training camp. For PJ, I mean, I think you look at the injury history. Brandon Jones dealt with a couple injuries last year. Talanoa Hufanga's injury history, you have to factor in. Like, it's a physical position, and there's a chance that these guys could get banged up. So you need to make sure your guys, if you're going to lose one of those guys, who's capable of stepping in and starting. PJ, in my opinion, is the safest guy in terms of saying, hey, like, you need a guy who's got starting experience. Okay, PJ's the guy. But in the meantime, as Sean Payton even told me, and he answered this question as well, he said, hey, like, the key in the path to making the roster at safety, if you're not a starter, it's special teams. PJ made his hay, became a name in the NFL because of his impact on special teams, then stepped into a starting role. JL Skinner is another guy that I think is very, very qualified to be able to play and start for you and maybe take on a little bit of a bigger role. I think they're going to envision him for maybe a specified role this upcoming season, maybe as a big nickel or maybe as a dime linebacker. It just depends on what you want to do with your safeties. And I think it's contingent upon matchup, who you're facing. But I'll even say this as well. I think Keidron Smith, I think Tanner McAllister, I think those younger safeties, Devin Key, I think those guys have also had an impressive offseason as well. Like, this is a loaded room. And I haven't brought up Sam Franklin Jr. much, number 42. Haven't seen too much just yet. We'll see where that goes, obviously, when training camp rolls around. But, man, I think the safety room is one room we probably want to hear and see a little bit more of, just for some clarity purposes as training camp rolls around.
100%. And I'm excited for that competition. I'm excited to see the guys in the trenches with the pads on, right? I mean, when you talk about who do we want to see more of at training camp, man, I want to see the big, nasty, ugly guys down in the front right there, right? I want to see those guys. I want to see the developmental players on the offensive and defensive lines, what they're able to do in terms of the pads are now on. You can go out there, be more physical. Who's going to stand out? Who's going to stand out in terms of getting that push on because I think the offensive side has a bit of a disadvantage against the guys they've invested in defensively. There's a third-round pick out there now, a third-round rookie in Savion Jones. There's a fourth-round pick in Inyoma Wazirike. There's other guys the Broncos have re-signed, and they're so deep on the D line, but on the offensive line, it's like the money ball guys, right?
Yeah.
We got Alex Palczewski. He's been waiting in the wings. You got Frank Crum. He's developed. He's getting bigger and more physical. Nick Gargiulo, Clay Webb, the rookie free agent.
Calvin Throckmorton's been getting a lot of run too.
Calvin Throckmorton. So all these guys that I think that, we don't get to hear much about because the pads aren't on and you can't be as physical. How do they fare against each other? Those two battles, the top two position groups, according to the head coach and the general manager going at it, that I want to see more of that.
Well, and look, I realized this on day one of mandatory minicamp. You realize Quinn Miners cut his hair.
Yeah.
He cut his hair.
Yeah.
He no longer has the locks, but man, he's muscular. He's big now. So I'm excited. You just want to see him play with that intensity he's always had there. Hopefully cutting the hair is not like a sign of like losing your powers. It's kind of like when Thor got the haircut right after having the long hair, he gets the haircut and it's like an adjustment period. Maybe he's just tapping into his, his inner. What is Thor anyways? I forget. Like, I don't even know what the lineage is.
God of Thunder.
God of Thunder. So
Norse.
Can Quinn Miners, is his new nickname going to become Thor? Maybe. We'll see here. But
yeah, we don't
Broncos Country, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for tuning in, rocking with us, all the everydayers out there. Thanks for making us your first listen. Sayre and myself, we're so excited to be able to cover this team for you every single day, wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube. So make sure you let us know which players you'd like to see and hear more of as training camp approaches as well. I will not be on the next episode. Sayre's got you covered for a few days here coming up the next week. I'm off to get married. Sayre's going to open up a mailbag for all of you in Broncos Country, and I know Sayre's going to hold down the fort as he always does. So make sure you stay tuned over here, Locked On Broncos, because next time you see us, Sayre's going to answer your Broncos questions. We'll see you next time, Broncos Country. Enjoy your weekend.